tat prana itare cha tam. Mritya vapanam sotsargam tam panchat pehya joha vit. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, and the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the five elements, and his body unto death. Taddeva darshiyati dvabhyam. So what was stated in text 40 is now revealed in further detail in two verses, 41, 42. Vacham iti upalakshanam. He relinquished his speeches into the mind. Here, speech or the faculty of speech is an indication. It is a reference to all the senses. Sarvendriyani manasi pravilapitavan ityarthaha. He amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind. Acha manah prane, then the mind into life. Pranadhina pravrittitvat, because the mind functions under life, under the control of life, or only because of life. Tamcha pranam itare apane tena akrshanat. So in that way, then life is merged into breathing. Apana vyapara utsargas tatsaitam apanam mritya tattadishtatri devataya. So in that way, one by one, his body unto death refers to his body unto the presiding deity of death. Anvenaiva vagadishvapi tattat karma sahityam geyam tam mrityam panchatre panchabhutanam enkede ekasya mrityu atmana iti bhavitavan ityartha. So the point is, he understood that only the body is going to die. I'm not going to die. So this is metaphorical. It is a certain method of philosophical meditation. So this is referring to his material body. This is not in reference to his original spiritual body as an associate of Lord Shri Krishna. Arjunavad Yudhishtiropi Bahirανusandhana Nivrityartham Prayatate sma. Like Arjuna, Yudhishthira also, he endeavored to withdraw his senses from the external activities. He amalgamated. The exact word that's used is ajohavit, or here you have juhava. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur explains that this indicates that he offered them. So when it says he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, means that he offered the sense organs into the mind. He offered the mind to life. He offered life to breathing, and so on. So ultimately offered his body to death. What does that mean? He manas tubhyam eva indriyani dattani tava eva etani santu sampratam mama etehi prayojanam nasti iti dharayamasa. So he explains the first expression, vacham juhava manasi. He amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind. So he considered, oh my dear mind, I am now giving you these senses. Let them be with you. I have nothing to do with them. So in this way, he contemplated in this manner. Teshu svatva abhavena vastutaha sampradana abhavat na chaturthi. Evam agrepi sarvatra gyeya. He considered that these don't belong to me at all. Nanu aham kasya bhavami ityataha tanmanah prane juhava. Then who do I belong to? So in that way, the rest of the verse explains that. In the same way, he offered the mind to prana, prana to apana, and then to mrityu. मृत्यो त्वं देहस्यैव भव इति भावितवान् इत्यर्थः. He considered, oh my dear death, please accept this body. निर्ममत्वादि निष्पादकं युधिष्ठिरस्य प्रयत्नमाह वाचमे इति. This was Yudhishthir's endeavor to become free from all feelings of possessiveness. Maharaj Yudhishthir, like his brother Arjuna, began to concentrate within himself and gradually became freed from all material bondage. First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. Or in other words, he turned his mind toward the transcendental service of the Lord. He prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions or reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards the transcendental service to the Lord. There was no need, there was no longer a need for material activities. Actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are the reflection of the eternal soul, but the quality of the activities can be changed from matter to the transcendental service of the Lord. The material color of the mind is changed when one cleanses it of the contaminations of life breathing and thereby frees it from the contamination of repeated births and deaths and situates it in pure spiritual life. All is manifested by the temporary embodiment of the material body, which is a production of the mind at the time of death. But if the mind is purified by practice of transcendental loving service to the Lord and is constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is no more chance of the mind's producing another material body after death. It will be freed from absorption in material contamination, and the pure soul will be able to return home back to Godhead. 42. Tritve hutva cha panchatvam tacchaikatve juhon munihi sarvamatmanyajuhavi brahmanyatmanam avyaye. Thus amalgamating the gross body of 5 elements into the 3 qualitative modes of nature, he merged the modes into one nescience and then absorbed that nescience into the self, Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. So in that way, he merged the body into the 3 modes of material nature, which he merged into the one avidya, nescience, which he merged into the jivatma, and the jivatma is merged into avyaye kutasthe, the inexhaustible, eternally liberated supreme being. There's no further, there's nothing else you can merge into. तदेवम् अयोग्यं तत्सर्वम् अव्यक्त एव भावयित्वा योग्यं तत्सर्वं तदात्मनि भगवत्पार्षदरूपे अजुहवित् धारयामास. So everything material he considered to belong to avyakta or nescience, avidya. But there is a part of himself which is actually fit to be serving the Supreme Lord. So that he considered to be his original form as an associate of Bhagavat Parshada, associate of the Lord. Samcha Atmanam Narakritim Parabrahmani Samarpayamasa. And he offered that, his true self, to the Supreme Brahman, who has a human-like form. This Narakriti Parabrahma is an expression that appears in Vishnu Purana to refer to Lord Krishna. Tatascha Prithvi Adi Bhuta Panchakam Pasyati where will this body comprised of the five material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, where will that stand? Or that will stand in, they will be amalgamated into the three modes of nature. And then all of that will be merged into the totality of matter, Maya. And all of that will be merged into the Jiva in this sense. He considered, hey Jiva, oh my dear living entity, tavaitan mayamsha kritam upadhi trikam etasmat tvam prathak bhuteva virajasva na etasya adhino bhava iti bhavaha. Oh my dear mind, this the threefold designations which have been created by Maya, you should be separate from that. Shine in your own nature. Don't anymore be under the control of this arrangement. It cannot be panchatmana, it must be kincha. Moreover, offer the self into Brahman. Evam parikshiti swarajya bhavam vajre cha mathuram samarpya tat sambandham atmanah durikritya bahirnishchanta iva indriyadin api tat vashayitri vashayitari yogye samarpya antarnishinto bhavuva. So externally he became free from anxiety by offering his kingship to Parikshit, and he also offered Mathura to Vajra, and in that way he separated himself from that relationship. So in this way, externally he became free from anxiety. Just like that, he also offered the senses and so on to their respective controllers as appropriate, and he became internally free from anxiety. Tathahi brahmanah krishnasya jivaha jivasya vyashtimaya tasya gunatrayam gunatrayasya panchabhutatmako deha dehasya mrityur eva apanaha apanasya pranas tasya manaha manasa eva indriyani indriyanam eva vishaya rajyadi bhoga tesham cha bhokta samprati parikshideva natu aham iti vicharayamasa. So in this way, he considered that Brahman refers to Krishna, and Krishna is a person of the Jiva. The Jiva is the one for whose sake the collective Maya functions. The three modes functions for her. The body comprised of the five gross elements functions for the three modes of material nature. Death is for the body, the apana life air is for death, and prana is for apana, the mind is for prana, the senses are for the mind, and the sense objects are for the senses. The sense objects refer to the enjoyment of the kingdom and so on. So the enjoyer of all of that right now is Parikshit. It is not me. So he contemplated like this. This is the point. Kintu Bhagavan Nitya Parikaratvan Nitya Vigrahanam api tad tadanim Atmanam Prakrita Shariram Matva Eva Ayam Vicharaha api Kinchit Kare Eveti. Because he was an eternal associate of Bhagavan. There's some typing mistake here. He understood that he has an eternal form. He does not, so his contemplation of the material body in this matter was not a very serious thing. तं च पञ्चत्वशब्दितं देहं त्रित्वे गुणत्रये तच्च त्रित्वम् एकत्वे व्यष्टिरूपप्रकृति अंशे अजुहोत् तदेतत् सर्वम् आत्मनि अन्तर्यात्मनि तवैतत् शक्तिभूतं मम न किञ्चित् इत्यर्थः. So he considered that the body belongs to the three modes. The three modes belong to the aspect of prakriti. This is the collective maya. And all of that belongs to the Atma, which can also mean Antaryami, the Supreme Lord, the inner controller of everything. So, in other words, he considered as a prayer to that inner controller, all of this is your potency. None of that belongs to me. Tam atmanam brahmani swayam bhagavati purne krishne ajuhavit. Anyatra arpanam samshleshanam atma brahmanostvaikyam bodhyam. Yatha parikshiti. So everything else he considered to be actually belonging to them. But he considered that he is actually meant to be one in interest with Swayam Bhagavan, the perfect Lord Krishna. Esha bhavana yudhishtiradishu bhagavad parshadeshu pravishtan dharmadidevam devamshaneva natu tad upajivyam stan uddishyeti bodhyam. This bhavana, this meditation was conducted by Dharma and the other Devamshas who had entered into the associates of the Lord, the eternal associates named Yudhishthir, Bhima, and so on. Natu tat upajivyam stan uddishya. Now, this doesn't refer to those eternal associates who are actually giving life to these Devamshas. Tat parshada deva prapanchika devanam ashrayaniya iti padme drishtatva. Because we see in Padma Purana a statement that the devas of the material world are sheltered, they are meant to be sheltered by the associates of the Supreme Lord, who are themselves the original devas. All that is manifested in the material world is the product of the Mahat Tattva Avyakta. And things that are visible in our material vision are nothing but combinations and permutations of such variegated material products. But the living entity is different from such material products. It is due to the living entity's forgetfulness of his eternal nature as eternal servitor of the Lord and his false conception of being a so-called Lord of the material nature, the two principal causes of the mind's being materially affected, that he is obliged to enter into the existence of false sense enjoyment with its concomitant generation of material energies. Thus, the gross body of 5 elements is produced. Maharaj Yudhishthira reversed the action and merged the 5 elements of the body into the 3 modes of material nature. The qualitative distinction of the body as being good, bad, or mediocre is extinguished. And again, the qualitative manifestations become merged into the material energy, which is produced from a false sense of the pure living being. When one is thus inclined to become an associate of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, in one of the innumerable planets of the spiritual sky, especially in Goloka Vrindavan, one has to think always that he is different from the material energy and has nothing to do with it. And he has to realize himself as pure spirit. Brahman, qualitatively equal with the Supreme Brahman, Parameshwara. Maharaj Yudhishthira, after distributing his kingdom to Parikshit and Vajra, did not think himself emperor of the world or head of the Kuru dynasty. This sense of freedom from material relations, as well as freedom from the material engagement of the gross and subtle encirclement, makes one free to act as a servitor of the Lord, even though one is in the material world. This stage is called the Jivan Mukta stage, or the liberated stage, even while remaining in the material world. That is the process of ending material existence. One must not only think that he is Brahman, but must act like Brahman. One who only thinks himself Brahman is an impersonalist, and one who acts like Brahman is the pure devotee. Okay, there are some questions in the chat box. This is the Kashaya, or what? Right, anyway, the Kashaya or saffron loincloth of a sannyasi indicates freedom from all attractive material garments. This is from a previous purpose. So although one is wearing saffron, if one has attachment for these things, what does it mean? But these attachments are very minor compared to the attachments of householder. We will see that in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation to the fifth canto. The total land on the earth bordered by the seas was under the subjugation of the king of Hastinapur. What is the total land on the earth? The entire land. The entire land was under the subjugation of the king of Hastinapur. The entire land mass on earth. They were even free from all bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, and disturbances caused by natural phenomena and other living beings. This is from a previous translation. How is this possible? We read in Gita, this material world is a place of miseries. If you surrender to Lord Krishna and you engage in devotion service, then you do not experience it. Same Bhagavad Gita also says, Maam cha yog vibhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityayitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So they do not, those who are fully surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord, they do not experience the pangs of material existence. Brahmabhuta prasannatma nashochati na kankshati. So those who engage in such devotional service, that when we come to that point, we will also not experience it. Kleshagni, Shubhada, that will come. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Prabhu, in this
Your voice
42,
is low.
in purport of 42, I just want to confirm this. You said that Devansh portions who entered eternal associates body, they were praying like this, or they were doing all this amalgamation.
Yes.
Eternal associates need this.
The eternal associates are absorbed in Samadhi.
Okay. Okay, bro.
43. Chiravasa niraharo bhatavang mukta murthajaha darshayan atmano rupam jadonmatta pishachavat anavekshmano niragat ashvin one badhiro yatha. After that, Maharaj Yudhishthir dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything. And just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. Tadevam atma pratipattimukva bahyasthitimaha. So this was his internal accomplishment. Now, Ruta Goswami describes his external situation in 2 verses, beginning with 43. So this is the external situation of Yudhishthira, who was completely free from anxiety. This is the Brahmi Sthiti. Brahmi Sthiti we know from Bhagavad Gita also, 2nd chapter. Thus being freed from all external affairs, he had nothing to do with imperial life or false or family prestige. And for all practical purposes, he posed himself exactly like an inert, mad urchin and did not speak of material affairs. He had no dependence on his brothers, who had all along been helping him. This stage of complete independence from everything is also called the purified stage of fearlessness. 44. Udicim praviveshasham Hridi Brahma Param Dhyayan. No. Udicim Praveshasham Gatapurva Mahatma Bhi Priti Brahma Param Dhyayan Avarteta Yato Gataha. He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. The great men here refers to those who have distinct knowledge about the Supreme Being. There is something in the chat box. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear from this horrible age. This is also from a previous purport. How to understand someone is under the protection of the Lord or not? He will not be affected by the provocations of the age of Kali. From that we understand. अधुना न्यस्त समस्त भारोहम अव्यग्रह क्वापि विविक्ते देशे श्री कृष्ण प्राप्त्यर्थम मन्मना भव मद्भक्ते इति भगवद उपदिष्टम एव उपायं करिष्यामि इति निश्चिन्वतः तस्य चेष्टामाह उदीचीमिति. So now that I am freed from all these responsibilities, I can, without anxiety, in a solitary place, I should carry out that means by which I can attain Lord Sri Krishna. That means has been instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru. So he came to this conclusion. And the activities that he executed, the endeavors that he took up at that time, that is now stated here. Param Brahma Shri Krishnam Dhyayan Dhyatum. Constantly thinking of means he prepared in order to constantly think of the Supreme Brahman, Sri Krishna. It is understood from this verse that Maharaj Yudhishthira followed in the footsteps of his forefathers and the great devotees of the Lord. We have discussed many times before that the system of Varnashrama Dharma, as it was strictly followed by the inhabitants of the world, specifically by those who inhabited the Aryavarta province of the world, emphasizes the importance of leaving all household connections at a certain stage of life. So every time Prabhupada talks about accepting Varnashrama Dharma, it means progressing. It means progressing through the Varnas and progressing through the ashramas. Just as much as when we say, I have put my son, I have put my younger brother in the school, it is automatically understood that he is meant to progress through the school. Not that whole life he is in 5th standard means whole life is in 5th standard. Not like that. He's supposed to progress. So when we actually increasingly intensify our engagement in Bhakti Yoga, from Gunibhuta Bhakti, we upgrade to Pradhanibhuta Bhakti to Kevala Bhakti. Naturally, we progress through the Varnas to become qualified Brahmanas. And then naturally, from Grihastha life, one will progress to Vanaprastha life and Sannyas life. Maybe externally officially or externally unofficially. But one will come to the point of accepting the prescriptions, prohibitions, and allowances of a qualified Brahmana from the ashrama perspective and from the Varna perspective. And from the ashrama perspective, one will come to the point of accepting the prescriptions, prohibitions, and allowance of a sannyasi. The training and education was so important, and as a respectable person like Maharaj Yudhishthira had to leave all family connection for self-realization and going back home, back to Godhead. for self-realization and for going back home, back to Godhead. No king or respectable gentleman would continue family life till the end, because that was considered suicidal and against the interest of the perfection of human life. In order to be free from all family encumbrances and devote oneself 10% in the devotion service of Lord Krishna, this system is always recommended for everyone because it is the path of authority. The Lord instructs in the Bhagavad Gita 18.62 that one must become a devotee of the Lord at least at the last stage of one's life. Tammeva sharanam gacha. Surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. So this indicates at least at the last stage of one's life, one should surrender. Surrender means to surrender to Bhakti Yoga. To surrender to Bhakti Yoga means to stop all other activities other than the activity of Bhakti Yoga. Kevala Bhakti. And internally also, one should give up the desire for all possible sense enjoyment that you can attain in this body, all possible sense enjoyment that you can attain in a future body, and give up the desire for impersonal liberation, and then later give up the desire for personal liberation also. That is what is surrender. A sincere soul of the Lord like Maharaj Yudhishthir must abide by this instruction of the Lord for his own interest. The specific words Brahma Param indicate Lord Sri Krishna. This is corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita 10.12 to 13 by Arjuna with reference to great authorities like Asita, Devala, and Narada and Vyasa. Thus Maharaj Yudhishthir, while leaving home for the north, constantly remembered Lord Sri Krishna within himself, following in the footsteps of his forefathers, as well as the great devotees of all times. 45. Sarvetam anunirjagmur bhratarah kritanishchayah kalina dharmamitrena drishtva sprishta praja bhuvi. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. Bhratara Kritanishchaya. The brothers also decided in the same manner. They decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother, means Sri Krishnam Praptum Vayamopi Tan Manaska Eva Bhavama. We will also fix our minds exclusively on Lord Sri Krishna in order to attain Lord Sri Krishna. So they also came to this conclusion. Krishna Dhyanam Eva Krishna Prapakam iti Krito Nishchayo Yaiste. All of them came to the conclusion that it is meditation on Lord Shri Krishna. Meditation means that you do nothing else. That kind of engagement in remembrance of the Supreme Lord is called meditation. So the Nirapekshas are considered to be meditating on the Supreme Lord. That is because they have decided to only engage in activities of Bhakti Yoga. So they came to this conclusion. Where it is written in 1862, at least at the last stage of life of surrender to the Lord. No, that 18.62 means that at least at the last stage of life, one should surrender to the Lord. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir were already obedient followers of the great emperor. And they had sufficiently been trained to know the ultimate goal of life. They therefore decided to follow their eldest brother in rendering devotion service to Lord Sri Krishna. According to the principles of Sanatana Dharma, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished and must engage himself in self-realization. But the question of engaging oneself is not always decided. Sometimes retired men are bewildered about how to engage themselves for the last days of life. And nowadays, it is not sometimes, it is almost everyone. Because you think that why not just squeeze out a little bit of happiness from family life? In so many different ways, the mind agitates. Here is a decision by authorities like the Pandavas. All of them engaged themselves in favorably culturing the devotion service of the Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Swami Sridhara, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are fruitive activities, philosophical speculations, and salvation as conceived by several persons are not the ultimate goal of life. They are more or less practiced by persons who have no information of the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is already indicated by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 18.65, and the Pandavas were intelligent enough to follow it without hesitation. So Sridhar Swami had mentioned in his commentary to 1.1.2 that in this literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, all kinds of cheating religions are rejected. And that cheating includes the pursuit of liberation. (46) Te sadhukrita sarvartha yatvadyantikamaat manaha anasadharayamasur vaikuntha charanambujam. They all had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna are the supreme goal of all. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption. So they had executed the pursuit of Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And therefore, they had come to the conclusion that we should simply take absolute shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is also a name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Te Pandavaha sadhu yathasya tatha krita sarvartha vashikrita dharma artha kama moksha api Vaikunthasya Sri Krishnasya charanamujameva atyantikam paramapurushartham gyatva tadeva manasa dharayamasu. So even though this is nonsense. It was Zoom trying to understand which language I read out because it wanted to transcribe accurately. The Pandavas, they properly considered that they had already accomplished they had already attained all the goals of life, which means Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Despite that, they understood that absolute surrender unto the lotus feet of Vaikuntha, which means Lord Sri Krishna, is the supreme goal of human existence. And therefore, that they accepted with full concentration in their minds. So this was the quote that Prabhupada was referring to. That they had executed Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha properly, and therefore they came to the conclusion that surrender to the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna is the ultimate all in all, according to Sridhar Swami. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.28, the Lord says that only those who have done pious deeds in previous lives and have become freed from the results of all impious acts can concentrate upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. See, when we execute offenses, when we commit offenses or sinful activities, then there are certain reactions to them which are referred to as sinful reactions, papa. So, or papa phala, to be more accurate, or aparada phala. So these are attached to the subtle bodies, and they increase our taste to engage in such sinful activities and offenses. And they become obstacles towards attainment of pure devotion service and so on. So therefore, that statement was made by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7.28. Yesham tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajante mam dridham vrata. Only they can execute bhakti yoga with firm vows. The Pandavas, not only in this life, but also in their previous lives, had always performed the supreme pious work, and thus they are ever free from all the reactions of impious work. It is quite reasonable, therefore, concentrated their minds upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. According to Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, the principles of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are accepted by persons who are not free from the results of impious action. Such persons affected with the contaminations of the above four principles cannot at once accept the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual sky. The Vaikuntha world is situated far beyond the material sky. The material sky is under the management of Durga Devi, or the material energy of the Lord, but the Vaikuntha world is managed by the personal energy of the Lord. So that one who is pursuing Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha is not ready to accept the lotus feet of the Lord of the spiritual sky is clear from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's writings, many places. There is something in the chat box. Sometimes it seems as I'm going against the nature, as Kali Yuga is not at all favorable. Still, I'm trying to become a pure sadhu as previous generations, which is not at all possible. Which is not at all possible as long as we don't follow the process. The process, as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is to bring all of us to the point of Krishna Prema, highest perfection of pure devotional service to Krishna. It is possible if we execute everything correctly. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in one of his booklets points out that if you do not follow the scriptural injunctions and try to make spiritual progress in Bhakti Yoga, then you will constantly experience obstacles and difficulties. And he says, persons who have disobeyed the scriptures, because Bhakti Yoga is meant to be carried out in accordance with the scriptures. There are different stages of Bhakti Yoga. There are different levels of commitment to Bhakti Yoga also. Gunibhuta Bhakti, Pradhanibhuta Bhakti, Kevala Bhakti. So if I'm in Gunibhuta stage, then what combination of activities I should engage in, what I should aspire for, whom I should associate with, all of this is well specified. Same thing for Pradhanibhuta Bhakti, same thing for Kevala Bhakti. So if I don't follow these scriptural injunctions meticulously, then I will constantly experience difficulties. In fact, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, persons have experienced problems, they do experience problems, and they will continue to experience problems as long as they don't follow the scriptures properly. They're meant to follow the scriptures. So that applies for all of us also. Okay, 47 and 48. Tadhyano driktaya bhaktya vishuddha dishanah pare tasmin narayana pade ekantam matayo gatim avapur dvaravapam te asadbhir vishayatma bhihi vidhuta kalmashasthanam virajen atmanaivahi. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotion, remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayana, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord, Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies. So they did not attain their bodies with their subtle bodies made of the 16 elements and so on. Narayana Sri Krishna here. Narayana Pade. In this, Narayana appears. That Narayana is Sri Krishna. One of Krishna's names is Narayana also. Narayana is also one of Krishna's names. There is one Upanishad called Mahanarayana Upanishad. So there it says, this is pointed out by Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan. Brahmanyo Devaki Putra, Brahmanyo Madhusudanaha. The Brahmanya, the various meanings of Brahmanya, the supreme Brahman, the one who is devoted to, the one who is revealed through Shabda Brahma, the one who is devoted to Vedic culture, that Lord Narayana. The entire Upanishad is on Narayana. That is the son of Devaki. So Krishna, Narayana is one of the names of Lord Krishna also. Viduta kalmasham yathasthanam nitya Shri Krishna prakasha aspadam adiya sabha. So he attained the assembly of that is found in the eternal pastimes of the Lord. Atmana swasharirena eva, in his own body. Hetuhu virajena aprakritena. Their intelligence was not mixed with jnana, yoga, and other such Vedic processes. Ateva ekantamateva. Therefore, their minds were exclusively fixed on Lord Krishna because they were only executing Krishna Bhakti. So they attained the eternal abode of the Lord. They attained the assembly of the Lord in the spiritual world, in Krishna Loka, called Sudharma. Virajena, Nirmalena, Gunamaya Dharma Indradyamsharahitya Aprakritena Atmana Swasharirena Eva Natu Deha Bhangena Ityartaha. So the eternal associates, they attained this abode, not Dharmaraj, Indra, not the Amshas of Dharmaraj, Indra, and so on, who had been in their body. They did not attain. It is the eternal associates who attained. Vishuddha, Marjita, their minds had become, their intelligence had become cleansed. Cleansed from the desire for happiness, the happiness and opulence that is found in the spiritual world. Tat seva sukhaika nishtadiyaha ityarthaha. Their intelligence were exclusively fixed in the happiness of serving the Supreme Lord. Pare Shresthe Tasmin Narayana Pade Badari Ashrame Gatim Praputu. So they attained Badarika Ashrama, the abode of Narayana Rishi. So this is externally they attained. Vidu the Kalmashana. So what kind of abode was this? Ultimately, which abode did they attain? Ultimately, they attained the residence of Uddhava and the other eternal associates, who were entirely freed from all kinds of contamination. That residence where there is the assembly known as Sudharma, that residence which is Krishna's abode, named Kushasthali or Dwaraka. And the eternal associates, they attained with their own forms. They did not give up their bodies and so on. They were separated from the portions of Dharmaraj, Vayu, Indra, and so on, because their portions are filled with the modes of material nature. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, a person freed from the three modes of material qualities, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, and situated in transcendence, can reach the highest perfection of life without change of body. Srila Sanatana Goswami says in his Haribhakti Vilas that a person, whatever he may be, can attain the perfection of a twice-born Brahmana by undergoing the spiritual disciplinary actions under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, exactly as a chemist can turn gunmetal into gold by chemical manipulation. It is therefore the actual guidance that matters in the process of becoming a Brahmana, even without change of body, or in going back to Godhead without change of body. Srila Jiva Goswami remarks that the word he used in this connection positively affirms this truth, and there is no doubt about this factual position. The Bhagavad Gita 14.26 also affirms this statement of Srila Jiva Goswami, when the Lord says that anyone who executes devotional service systematically, without deviation, can attain the perfection of Brahman by surpassing the contamination of the three modes of material nature. And when the Brahman perfection is still more advanced by the self-same execution of devotional service, there is no doubt at all that one can attain the supreme spiritual planet Goloka Vrindavan without change of body, as we have already discussed in connection with the Lord's returning to his abode without a change of body. See the purport to text 32 of this chapter 49. Mohan Radhapati Prabhu.
Prabhu, as we read in these purports that there were different persons functioning, like sometimes the eternal associates function, sometimes the Devangsas they function. Like
Yes.
in the case of amalgamation, the that was Devans. So throughout the life of Pandavas in Mahabharata, so can we recognize like what actions were done by whom? Like were they functioned by Devans or the eternal associates?
The Mahabharata generally describes the Devamshas, and the Srimad Bhagavatam generally describes the eternal associates.
So the relation, the activities which the Pandavas did with Lord Krishna.
No, both of them, they all did always with relation to Krishna only. The Devamshas are also devotees of Krishna only. Your voice is breaking.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Okay, you have to repeat.
Okay, Prabhu. So one more question was there about surrendered souls. You told that the surrendered souls.
You have to repeat. So this is what you are saying? I could not hear because it was breaking.
No, I was telling that time that in Bhagavatam, whatever is described about the relations of the Pandavas with Lord Krishna, so they are all the functions of eternal associates, right?
Yes.
Yes, Prabhu. I understood that, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay.
Another question was that about surrendered souls. You told that the surrendered souls are the Kevala Bhaktas. So, and those who are rendering this Pradhanibhut Bhakti, they cannot be considered as surrendered souls?
They're not fully surrendered. They are surrendered. But fully surrendered souls are the Nirapeksha devotees. There are devotees, surrendered devotees, fully surrendered devotees. The Swanishta devotees of the Lord are devotees of the Lord. The Paranishtita devotees of the Lord are surrendered devotees of the Lord. The Nirapeksha devotees of the Lord are fully surrendered devotees of the Lord.
This is because the Nirapekshas, they very quickly go to the Kevala Bhakti, and others they take different times. That's right.
Yes, because their faith is not as strong. The Paranishtitas have faith in Pradhanibhuta Bhakti, The Swanishtas have faith in Gunibhuta Bhakti. Everybody wants to come to the point of becoming qualified to enter the spiritual world and eternal lives of the Lord. But you know, they may be having other. They do have other pursuits also. So everything has to be coordinated and brought. They have to be coordinated and brought in such a manner that they don't contradict their highest pursuit. That is why.
Okay, Prabhu.
Achyutanam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, where can we know details of these three levels? Gunibhuta, Pradhanibhuta, and Kevala Bhakti. Like you said, we should know on which level we are and then follow the respective regulations in scriptural injunctions. So I don't know.
Gunibhuta Bhakti means one is spending a few hours a day in devotional service to Lord Vishnu. In time, he's executing the material pious duties that are required to sustain oneself and so on. Of course, not committing sinful activities or offenses. So are you doing that? You're not doing that.
No.
You're not doing that. You're not supposed to do that also. We are not, none of us are supposed to do that. That's not applicable to us. The householders who have come to the dham and so on, they are at least expected to engage in Pradhanibhuta Bhakti, which means most of their time they are supposed to be engaging in devotional service to the Supreme Lord. With a little bit of time for maintaining their family and so on. That would then be Pradhanibhuta Bhakti. Of course, without sins or without offenses. And those who have even given up commitments for family life, they are expected to be fully engaged in activities of Bhakti Yoga, Navamida Bhakti. So all of us are expected to be like that. We are not supposed to execute our material, duties and so on. Similarly, we are not supposed to engage in sinful activities, offenses, and so on.
So then you said that there are different gradations whom they should associate with and other things.
Yes, each one has to associate with someone who is more advanced.
Are there other details also about do's and don'ts?
Yes, when we, throughout Bhagavatam, we'll come across this. We'll come across all this. Okay, there's a question here in the chat box. This statement of Srila Jiva Goswami, when the Lord says that anyone who executes devotional service systematically without deviation, this is not a complete sentence. So systematically without deviation, that means you follow the scriptures, you follow it the way the predecessor acharyas have demonstrated it, and they have shown that you attain this result when you execute like this. That is called systematically following. 49.
So what previous acharya has shown?
Yes.
What is previous acharya shown? That I don't know.
You have to study their lives to understand how they executed Navamida Bhakti and what results they attained. विदुरोऽपि परित्यज्य प्रभासे देहमात्मनः कृष्णावेशेन तच्चित्तः पितृभिः स्वशय्यं ययौ. Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhasa. Because he was absorbed in thought of Lord Krishna, he was received by the denizens of the Pitraloka planet, where he returned to his original post. So he returned to his post, Swadhikara Sthanam. Jiva Goswami has added, Vidurasya Yamaloka Gatihi Swa Adhikara Palanartham Leelaya Ayavyuhena Iti Gyaya. It should be understood that Vidura's attaining Yamaloka in order to take charge of his official role was through a bodily expansion as a pastime. Tadithameva Sri Bhagavata Bharatayor Avirodhasyaditi. So in that way, there will be no contradiction between the Mahabharata and Bhagavatam. Devata Rupa eva natu Parshada Rupaha. So the Parshada Rupa, the eternal associate, he did not go to Yamaloka. The eternal associate went to the spiritual world. But the Devamsha, he went back to his post. Of course, when he went back to his post, he is also empowered. As we will see later on in Bhagavatam also, the demigods of the material world are empowered by particular associates of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. Empowered means that through a bodily expansion, they are present in their bodies and they are empowering them. Parshadastu tachittas tameva prapeti. The eternal associate became absorbed in thoughts of Lord Shri Krishna, Krishna Veshena Tachittaha. Whereas the Devamsha, that means these portions, he attained, that Devamsha attained his abode. The difference between the Pandavas and Vidura is that the Pandavas are eternal associates of the Lord, the personality of Godhead, whereas Vidura is one of the administrative demigods in charge of the Vitraloka planet. It is known as Yamaraj. This is how, in Srimad Bhagavatam, the Pandavas and Vidura are presented, and therefore Prabhupada is writing like this. Men are afraid of Yamaraj because it is he only who awards punishment to the miscreants of the material world, but those who are devotees of the Lord have nothing to fear from him. To the devotees, he is a cordial friend, but to the non-devotees, he is fear personified. As we have already discussed, it is understood that Yamaraj was cursed by Manduka Muni to be degraded as a Shudra, and therefore Vidura was an incarnation of Yamaraj. As an eternal servitor of the Lord, he displayed his devotional activities very ardently and lived a life of a pious man, so much so that a materialistic man like Dhritarashtra also got salvation by his instruction. So by his pious activities in the devotional service of the Lord, he was able to always remember the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus he became washed of all contamination of a Shudra-born life. At the end, he was again received by the denizens of Pitraloka and posted in his original position. The demigods are also associates of the Lord without personal touch, whereas the direct associates of the Lord are in constant personal touch with him. The Lord and his personal associates incarnate in many universes without cessation. The Lord remembers all these appearances, whereas the associates forget due to their being very minute parts and parcels of the Lord. They're apt to forget such incidents due to being infinitesimal. This is corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.5. Draupadi cha tadajyaya patinam anapekshatam vasudeve bhagavati hyekantam matirapatam. Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. So they understood that they were not waiting, they were not caring for both Draupadi and Subhadra. They understood that their husbands were not caring for her, meaning that they understood that they had attained the association of Lord Shri Krishna. Vasudeva refers to the son of Vasudeva. he indicates that this was very well known. He prasiddha. Yasmin ekantamatiस्थम् एव प्राप्तवती. अत्र अन्येन पथा गच्छतोऽपि एतान् द्वारकानाथ स्वयं स्वशक्त्या स्वसमीपम् एव आनीतवान् इति गम्यते. So even though they were going by a different pathway, the Lord of Sri Dwaraka, by his own potency, brought them to him. This should be concluded. Nityam Sannihitaha, because there are statements in Vishnu Purana and Bhagavata Purana that the Dwaraka is eternally filled with the presence of the Supreme Lord and his eternal associates. Tamma iti dehatyaga anuktiya sharirena eva iti. They also attain the Lord without having to give up their bodies. When flying an airplane, one cannot take care of other planes. Everyone has to take care of his own plane. And if there's any danger, no other plane can help another in that condition. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. The help is, however, offered on the ground before flying in space. Similarly, the spiritual master, the father, the mother, the relatives, the husband, and others can all render help during one's lifetime, teaching one how to cross the ocean of birth and death. But while crossing the sea, one has to take care of himself and utilize the instructions formerly received. So this is Prabhupada's excellent insight to the point that the Pandavas did not care for Draupadi or Subhadra Devi. Draupadi had 5 husbands, but none of them asked Draupadi to come with them. Draupadi had to take care of herself without waiting for her great husbands. And because she was already trained, she at once took to concentration upon the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The wives also got the same result as her husbands in the same manner. That is to say, without changing their bodies, they reached the destination of Godhead. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur suggests that both Draupadi and Subhadra, although her name is not mentioned here, got the same result. Neither of them had to quit the body. There's something in chat box. Can you explain in detail, if one is new for Krishna consciousness, how he can become pure devotee? What and all books one has to read? One has to read, first of all, Prabhupada's books. Otherwise, you cannot figure out head or tail of how to progress in Krishna consciousness. You read Prabhupada's books and you carry out the instructions as presented by Prabhupada's followers, as long as they are in line with what is in the books, which is very easy to verify. And then one makes spiritual progress. If you're looking for a single book which sets out step by step, that book is Upadeshamrita, Nectar of Instruction. Okay, text 51. Yashraddhayaitat bhagavat priyanam pandav sutanam iti samprayanam Trinotyalam swastyayanam pavitram labdva haro bhaktim upaiti siddhim. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. Nityevam yat samprayanam alam atishayena swastyayanam mangalaspadam. This is excessively auspicious. This is greatly auspicious. Very, very pure also. So one who takes shelter of this particular mode of devotional service by which the sons of Pandu attained the ultimate goal of life, such a person will also attain the highest perfection of life. Not if he takes up other pathways. There are so many pathways to attain the spiritual world. But the pathway that was displayed here is the pathway of coming to the point of Kevala Bhakti, internally and externally. Internally giving up all desires for Kama, Artha, Dharma, and Moksha. and externally in giving up anyabhilashita, karma, dhyana, yoga, and only executing bhakti. Internally desiring only the pleasure of Lord Sri Krishna. So that kind of liberation. When Baladev Vidyabhushan talks about liberation, he is talking about moksham vishnuangri labham, attaining eternal service to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. That is what is known as liberation in Vedanta Darshan. Srimad Bhagavatam is a narration about the personality of Godhead and the devotees of the Lord, like the Pandavas. The narration of the personality of Godhead and his devotees is absolute in itself, and thus to hear it with the devotional attitude is to associate with the Lord and constant companions with the Lord. Such constant companionship with the Lord by the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam helps one attain the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead without fail. Chapter 16, how Parikshit received the age of Kali. 1. Sutovacha, Tatah Parikshit Vijavarya Shikshaya, Mahim Mahabhagavatasya Shasaha, Yathahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida, Samadishan Vipram Mahadgunas Tatha. Suta Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. Tatascha shodashe bhumi dharmayoh kalikhinnayoh samvade varnyate prapti palak parikshitaha. So in chapter 16, it is described that when Parikshit was maintaining his kingdom, he came across Bhumi and Dharma, who were both pained by Kali Purusha when they were engaged in a conversation. So Parikshit was listening to the bona fide instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. Parikshito digvijayo dharma prashnakshitim prati tasya krishna viyuktaya shokoktish shodashe bhavat. So Parikshit Maharaj, he conquered all the directions. That is described here. Dharma asked certain questions to Prithvi, Mother Earth. Prithvi spoke in lamentation when she was in distress upon being separated from Lord Shri Krishna. All of this is brought out in chapter 16. Tato digvijayotra shodashe prashnascha dharmasya vasundharam prati govinda padambuja sanga vichute shokasya tasya vividho vidiyate. Mahatam yudhishtiradinam gunai yasmin saha. Mahat guna. He ruled by those great qualities which are foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth, which means he exhibited those qualities of Yudhishthira and others that were enlisted at that time. At the time of Maharaj Parikshit's birth, the expert astrologer Brahmanas foretold some of his great qualities. Maharaj Parikshit developed all those qualities, being a great devotee of the Lord. The real qualification is to become a devotee of the Lord, and gradually all the good qualities worthy of possession develop. Maharaj Parikshit was a Mahabhagavata, or a first-class devotee, who was not only well-versed in the science of devotion, but also able to convert others to become devotees by his transcendental instructions. Maharaj Parikshit was therefore a devotee of the first order, and thus he used to consult great sages and learned Brahmanas who could advise him by the Shastras how to execute the state administration. Such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in Vedic literatures. There was no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some purpose. These are all the pathologies of democracy. The rules and regulations were already set forth by great liberated sages like Manu, Yagyavalkya, and Parashara, and the enactments were all suitable for all ages and all places. Therefore, the rules and regulations were standard and without flaw or defect. Kings like Maharaj Parikshit had their council of advisors, and all the members of the council were either great sages or brahmanas of the first order. They were of the first order, first class brahmanas, and therefore they did not accept any salary, nor had they any necessity for such a salary. Emphasis: the state would get the best advice without expenditure. They were themselves samadarshi, equal to everyone, both man and animal. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals. Such council members were not fools or representatives to compose a fool's paradise. They were all self-realized souls, and they knew perfectly well how all living beings in the state would be happy, both in this life and in the next. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. They were philosophers in the real sense, and they knew well what is the mission of human life. Under all these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions, and the king or executive head, being himself a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinizingly follow them for the welfare of the state. The state in the days of Maharaj Yudhishthir or Maharaj Parikshit was a welfare state in the real sense of the term, because no one was unhappy in that state, be he man or animal. Maharaj Parikshit was an ideal king for a welfare state of the world. Welfare state is an expression that you come across in civics. A welfare state is a state or a country which is dedicated to doing good to its citizens. 2. Sa uttarasya tanayam upayema iravatim janame jaya deems chaturas tasyam utpadayat sutan. King Parikshit married the daughter of King Uttar and begot 4 sons headed by Maharaj Janamejaya. Sutan utpadayitum upayema iti vakya yojana. He married the daughter of King Uttara in order to beget sons. So Uttarasya tanayam iti purvakatha rajya abhisheka prak brahmacharye rajya abhisheka ayogat. Before he was anointed as a king, before that rajya abhisheka could happen, he was married to Uttar's daughter. This happened before Parikshit was appointed the king. Brahmacharya Rajya Abhisheka Yoga, because when one is a brahmachari, he is not allowed to be anointed a king. A king must necessarily have at least one wife. Maharaj Uttar was the son of Virata and maternal uncle of Maharaj Parikshit. Iravati, being the daughter of Maharaj Uttar, was the cousin sister of Maharaj Parikshit, but cousin brothers and sisters were allowed to get married because they did not belong to the same Gotra or family. In the Vedic system of marriage, the importance of Gotra or family was stressed. Arjuna also married Subhadra, although she was his maternal cousin sister, but she also belonged to a different Gotra. Janamejaya, one of the Rajarshi kings and the famous son of Maharaj Parikshit. His mother's name was Iravati, or according to some, Madravati. Maharaj Janamejaya begot 2 sons of the names Yatanika and Shangukarna. He celebrated several sacrifices in the Kurukshetra pilgrimage site, and he had 3 younger brothers named Shutasena, Ugrasena, and Bhimasena too. He invaded Takshashila, Ajanta, and he decided to avenge the unlawful curse upon his great father Maharaj Parikshit. He performed a great sacrifice called Sarpayagya to kill the race of serpents, including the Takshaka, which had bitten his father to death. On the request of many influential demigods and sages, he had to change his decision to kill the race of snakes. But despite stopping the sacrifice, he satisfied all those who had participated in the sacrifice by rewarding them properly. In the ceremony, Mahamuni Vyasadeva also was present, and he personally narrated the history of the battle of Kurukshetra before the king. Later on, by the order of Vyasadeva, his disciple Vaishampayana narrated before the king the subject matter of the Mahabharata. He was much affected by his great father's untimely death and was very anxious to see him again. Unlike untimely death from his perspective, it was actually predicted that this is how he would pass away also. But nevertheless, the son considered his great father's death to be untimely death and was very anxious to see him again, and he expressed his desire before the great sage Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva also fulfilled his desire. With his father present before him, he worshipped both his father and Vyasadeva with great respect and pomp. Being fully satisfied, he most munificently gave charity to the Brahmanas present at the sacrifice. The entire Mahabharata is a discussion between Vaishampayana and Janamejaya. Actually, there were some sages who were, if I remember correctly, it was spoken by Suta Goswami, Mahabharata. And everything is the entire description is a flashback. Now, there was a great war. How did this war come about? Who got killed? Why did this happen? All these discussions. So initially, a summary of the history is given, and then they ask further questions, and then first the backstory is given. The previous history, what all led to the birth of the Pandavas and Kauravas, and like that. The actual story of the Pandavas and Kauravas in the original Mahabharata is about 40% of the book. The remaining is all having various other historical narrations mixed in, along with the various religious, spiritual, and devotional instructions. Achyutanam Prabhu.
Prabhu, why was that mandatory for a Kshatriya to marry before becoming a king?
Kshatriyas need to have female association. There are various other reasons. We don't need to discuss all this. It's all Artha Shastra content.
Okay.
But Kshatriyas need to have a wife, at least one wife. Okay, let me at least read out this next verse. Ajaharashvamedham strim Gangayam bhuri dakshinan Sharadvatam gurum kritva deva yatrakshi kochara. Maharaj Parikshit, after having selected Kripacharya for guidance as a spiritual master, performed 3 horse sacrifices on the banks of the Ganges. They were executed with lavish rewards for the attendants, and at these sacrifices, even the common man could see demigods. Okay, let me read this out. It appears from this verse that interplanetary travel by the denizens of higher planets is easy for them. In many statements in the Bhagavatam, we have observed that the demigods from heaven used to visit this earth to attend sacrifices performed by influential kings and emperors. Herein also, we find that during the time of the horse sacrifice ceremony of Maharaj Parikshit, the demigods from other planets were visible, even to the common man, due to the sacrificial ceremony. The demigods are not generally visible to common man, as the Lord is not visible. But as the Lord, by his causeless mercy, descends to be visible to the common man, similarly, the demigods also become visible to the common man by their own grace. Although celestial beings are not visible to the naked eyes of the inhabitants of this earth, it was due to the influence of Maharaj Parikshit that the demigods also agreed to be visible. The kings used to spend lavishly during such sacrifices as the cloud distributes rains. The cloud is nothing but another form of water, or in other words, the waters of the earth transform into clouds. Similarly, the charity made by the kings in such sacrifices is but another form of the taxes collected from the citizen. But as the rains fall down very lavishly and appear to be more than necessary, the charity made by such kings also seems to be more than what the citizens need. Satisfied citizens will never organize agitation against the king And thus there was no need in changing the monarchical state. The logic is this: the citizens will easily understand that this person is both practical and capable. On top of it, he is sufficiently selfless. If we throw him out and any of us, individually or collectively, sit on his seat, we will not be able to do this kind of collective good. We are not capable also, nor do we have such degree of selflessness. And we are not trained in that also. So therefore, they do not want to change the monarchical state. Even for a king like Maharaj Parikshit, there was need of a spiritual master for guidance. Without such guidance, one cannot make progress in spiritual life. The spiritual master must be bona fide. And one who wants to have self-realization must approach and take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master to achieve real success. Okay, so I'll stop with that. Anshadalpaturvyasya kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Somapati Gauranga Prabhu, better do one thing. You ask this question in the group. Either type it up or ask in a voice message.
Okay, bro. Right.